Welcome to Scarlet Tavern. Grab a drink, take a seat, and let's begin. Tonight, we're piecing together everything we've learned, every theory, every chilling detail, as we try to answer one final question. Can this mystery ever be solved? We've chased cryptic ciphers, profiled suspects, and followed countless leads. Yet the Zodiac's shadows loom large. Will we leave this case with answers or just more questions? Grab your detective's hat one last time. Let's close the file on the Zodiac, or at least try to. This is Scarlet Tavern. All right. So,
now we're at the end.
We are at the end, and this is our season finale. So I'll make some statements at the end of the episode, but yeah, we want to thank you guys for being here on our season finale. So let's just jump right into it. We got a lot to wrap up. Okay, so we've explored the Zodiac's crimes, his taunting letters, the psychological profile that emerged, and the impact on his victims and their families. But despite decades of investigation, the Zodiac Killer's identity remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history. Tonight, we dive into the final chapter of our exploration, revisiting the suspects who have been at the center of this case for so long. From the prime candidates who were scrutinized in the early days of the investigation to the more recent names proposed by amateur sleuths, we'll look at the evidence, the theories, and the reasons why, after all these years, no one has been definitively linked to the Zodiac's crimes. Now, the Zodiac case has attracted hundreds of suspects over the years, but only a few have ever truly stood out as serious contenders. Arthur Lee Allen, Rick Marshall, and Lawrence Kane are perhaps the most well-known, each with their own unique set of circumstances that have kept them in the spotlight. But what is it about these men that drew the attention of investigators and the public alike? Arthur Lee Allen has long been considered the most likely candidate for the Zodiac Killer. The Vallejo resident and former elementary school teacher was first brought to the attention of the police in 1971 when his friend Don Chaney reported that Allen had made disturbing comments about his desire to kill people, his fascination with the Zodiac, and his plans to taunt the police. Allen's criminal record, he was a convicted child molester, and his unstable behavior made him a prime suspect. He owned a Zodiac brand watch that bore the same crosshair symbol as the killer's signature, and he had access to a car that matched the description of one seen near the crime scenes. Allen was also ambidextrous, which could explain why his handwriting didn't match the Zodiac's. Theoretically, he could have written the letters with his non-dominant hand. In the 1970s and the 1980s, police searched Allen's home multiple times, uncovering a cache of weapons, bomb-making materials, and disturbing writings, but nothing definitively linking him to the murders. Despite these findings, there was no concrete evidence, no DNA, no fingerprints, no direct tie that placed him at any of the crime scenes. When Allen died in 1992, many believed that the Zodiac case had died with him. But DNA analysis conducted in the early 2000s did not match Allen's genetic profile to the Zodiac letters, ruling him out as the author of the correspondences. While this result didn't entirely eliminate him as a suspect, it cast serious doubt on his involvement. Some investigators still believe he was the Zodiac, arguing that the DNA on the letters may have been from someone else entirely, such as a postal worker or an unwitting accomplice.
I never really liked him as the suspect. I mean, he's definitely a creep. He's definitely disturbed, but I don't know. It's just based on what the type of person I believe the Zodiac might have been, Arthur Lee just never really struck me as that. It always struck me as that he had a falling out with his friend, and his friend just kind of made some stuff up, and the police just kept homing in on him because, I mean, he's a child molester. He's a scumbag. It would be great to just get rid of him. So
yeah, and honestly, with him being a child molester, it doesn't make sense for him to all of a sudden go to murder.
Yeah.
Or an attempted murder.
Especially of adults.
Yeah.
Just seems kind of odd.
Rick Marshall, a projectionist with a background in electronics and a penchant for codes and ciphers, was another high-profile suspect. Marshall lived in the Bay Area during the time of the Zodiac murders and had connections to several locations near the crime scenes. He also bore a resemblance to the police schedules and was known to use aliases and engage in secretive behavior. Marshall's profession as a projectionist was intriguing because one of the Zodiac's letters contained a piece of paper with a rare watermark, one typically found in movie theaters. He also used a distinctive looping script that some handwriting experts claim bore similarity to the Zodiac's letters. Despite the circumstantial evidence, there was no direct physical evidence linking Marshall to the murders. His handwriting was ultimately deemed inconsistent with the Zodiac's, and interviews with those who knew him suggested he wasn't capable of the violent acts attributed to the killer. Rick Marshall passed away in 2008, his name still associated with the case, but without definitive proof of guilt. And for those saying, "Oh, projectionist, so he just played a movie," no, back in these days, you had to, because everything was done with reels and film. So to edit, just to edit movies, you would have to watch it. You would have to take a marker and mark where you wanted to cut. Then you had to physically take it out, cut it, glue it back together perfectly so that everything was seamless, and then put it back in and do that over and over and over to fix the stuff. So it takes a lot of talent and a lot of knowledge to be able to do that.
Yeah, nowadays it's all digital. It's just a computer that runs it. But yeah, you had to be able to be on time with the reel change, like you said with that. I don't know. This guy never. I mean, other than he just likes codes and ciphers, and
I like codes and ciphers.
Yeah, they really were.
Doesn't make me the Zodiac.
Are we sure?
Or does it?
Because you're pretty sadistic when it comes to the codes and ciphers and riddles and shit.
No, honey, we're just really done with them.
That's true.
I'm sorry. Come on. Come on. Are you going to say that we're not?
Well, some of us are. When I specifically said, hey, this is the answer. No, it's not. It's this. And nearly get us killed.
I'm never going to hear the end of it.
Please watch Dungeons and Magi or listen to Dungeon Magi anywhere you get your podcasts.
And please don't judge me harshly. I'm just really bad at riddles.
So, Lawrence Kane, a man with a history of mental instability and violence, emerged as a suspect largely due to his proximity to several Zodiac crime scenes and his resemblance to the police composite sketches. Kane's disturbing behavior, which included stalking women and aggressive outbursts, drew the attention of investigators. Kane was also linked to the disappearance of Donna Lass, a nurse who went missing in 1970 and was rumored to be a Zodiac victim. Kathleen Johns, a woman who was abducted and escaped from a man she believed to be the Zodiac in 1970, later identified Kane as her kidnapper. This identification added weight to the theory that he might have been the elusive killer. However, like the other suspects, there was no concrete evidence tying Kane to the Zodiac's crimes. His handwriting did not match, and there were no fingerprints or DNA to connect him to the case. Kane died in 2010, still considered a potential suspect, but never formally charged.
I mean, honestly, they always go to the sketch about the Zodiac, but looking at the sketch of him,
it's very basic.
It is the most generic white man ever. I mean, he literally looks like what every clean-cut American
That's
man.
Why he got away with it.
Exactly. So, I am not surprised the police departments in California were not able to get to this, because this is nothing to go on.
Yeah. Now, while Allen, Marshall, and Kane have dominated the suspect list, there have been several other intriguing names put forward over the years, none of which I believe are true. Yeah. Bruce Davis, a member of the Manson family, Davis was considered a suspect due to his presence in California during the time of the murders and his known history of violence. Some have speculated that Davis might have been involved in the Zodiac murders as a way of taunting law enforcement, but no evidence has ever linked him to the case.
They always seem to do that whenever they run out of like the legitimate.
They go to the Manson family.
Yeah, or just in general they find people from other cases and try and like do everything to link them to it.
Yeah. Richard Gaikowski, a journalist who worked for an underground newspaper in San Francisco. Gaikowski was considered a suspect due to his anti-establishment views and his physical resemblance to the Zodiac. He was also known to use code-like language in his personal writings. Despite these similarities, Gaikowski's involvement has never been substantiated.
Again, this is probably the San Francisco police probably didn't like this guy, and they were just like, hey, here's our chance to get him.
Earl Van Best Jr. Van Best was proposed as a suspect in the 2014 book The Most Dangerous Animal of All by Gary Stewart, who claimed Van Best was his biological father. Stewart pointed to similarities in handwriting, physical appearance, and a possible connection to Darlene Ferrin. However, Van Best's fingerprints and DNA did not match those on file for the Zodiac. That kid didn't like his...
I was about to say, just because you don't like your dad doesn't mean he's a serial killer.
Ross Sullivan, a library assistant with a troubled past, Sullivan was known to have an interest in cryptography and bore a resemblance to police sketches of the Zodiac. He was also linked to the murder of Cherry Joe Bates in 1966, which some believe was an early Zodiac crime, but like the others, Sullivan's involvement remains speculative. Now, the case of the unlikely suspect, Ted Kaczynski. Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber, has also been mentioned in connection with the Zodiac case. Kaczynski lived in Northern California during the time of the Zodiac murders and had a known penchant for cryptic messages and anti-establishment beliefs. He was highly intelligent, with a background in mathematics and linguistics, traits that match the Zodiac's perceived profile. However, Kaczynski's crimes were motivated by his extreme ideology, and there is no direct evidence linking him to the Zodiac. The differences in motive and behavior have led most experts to dismiss him as a serious suspect, though the theory continues to intrigue amateur sleuths.
I don't think he's connected.
He's not.
No.
So Ted Kaczynski literally published a memoir.
About the dangers of technology, and it's
he is a radical ideologist.
Yeah, he is. We would call him a Luddite.
I've actually read his entire...
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know if it's still available, but you can read it. It's like 400 pages long.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I mean, you got all the time in the world when you're between making bombs. But yeah, no, Ted Kaczynski was, like they said, he was an ideologue who took his who we'll cover more when we get to the Unabomber part of our, not next season, but probably the season
it might be next season.
Yeah.
I don't know yet.
But he's not... Ted Kaczynski killed people, but not like
this.
Not like this.
So in recent years, the rise of internet sleuths has introduced a host of new suspects, ranging from the plausible to the bizarre. Forums, websites, and social media platforms have become breeding grounds for new theories, some backed by research, and others based purely on conjecture. One such suspect, Gary Francis Post, was suggested by a group called the Case Breakers in 2021. They pointed to physical similarities in alleged eyewitness statements, but the claims were met with skepticism and criticism from law enforcement officials, who stated that there was no new evidence to support Post as a credible suspect. The challenge with many of these new suspects is that they often rely on circumstantial evidence and creative interpretations of the Zodiac's letters and ciphers. Without physical evidence, fingerprints, DNA, or a definitive match to the Zodiac handwriting, these theories remain speculative at best.
Everybody just wants their claim to fame that we solved it.
The Zodiac case remains unsolved for a multitude of reasons. The lack of conclusive physical evidence, the inconsistencies in witness statements, and the Zodiac's ability to remain one step ahead have all contributed to the elusiveness of his identity. Each suspect has seemed promising in some way, yet none has ever been able to meet the burden of proof required for conviction. It's possible that the Zodiac was never even on law enforcement's radar. He might have been an ordinary person, someone who blended in perfectly with society, hiding his monstrous nature behind a mask of normalcy. Or he could have been someone close to the investigation itself, aware of every move the police made, taunting them from within. With each suspect eliminated and each lead exhausted, the question remains, was the Zodiac a person we never suspected? A family man? A neighbor? Someone who died long ago taking his secrets to the grave? Or could he still be alive, watching as his legend continues to grow? The mystery of the Zodiac Killer isn't just about who he was. It's about what he represents. The embodiment of the unknown, the unsolved, and the fear that some crimes can never be truly laid to rest. In our final episode, we'll delve into what the future holds for the Zodiac case. We'll discuss whether technological advances will ever bring closure, how the Zodiac story has influenced modern investigations, and whether the identity of the Zodiac will forever remain just out of reach. Now, when we think of the Zodiac Killer, we typically associate him with the 5 confirmed murders and 2 attempted murders that took place in Northern California between 1968 and 69. But the Zodiac himself claimed to have killed 37 people in his letters to the press, leaving many to wonder if there are other victims out there, victims whose deaths were never connected to the infamous killer. This part of our series will explore the potential unsolved murders attributed to the Zodiac and examine the evidence that suggests he may have been far more prolific than anyone imagined. From the murder of a young college student in Riverside to a series of mysterious slayings that occurred outside of his known geographical area, we'll dive into the cases that have sparked speculation and debate for decades. Did the Zodiac start killing before his first confirmed attack? Did he continue his reign of terror under a different guise? Or was he embellishing his body count to elevate his status and further confuse investigators? Now, one of the most hotly debated potential Zodiac victims is Sherry Jo Bates, an 18-year-old college student who was brutally murdered on October 30th, 1966, outside the Riverside City College library. Bates had been studying in the library before her car was disabled, forcing her to seek help. Her body was found the next morning, stabbed and slashed multiple times on what appeared to be a crime of passion. In the months following Bates' murder, the Riverside Police Department received a series of anonymous letters, one of which was titled The Confession. The letter detailed the murder with chilling accuracy and included taunting remarks aimed at the police. Then, in 1967, the Riverside Press Enterprise and the Riverside Police Department received identical handwritten letters signed with a symbol resembling a Z. When the Zodiac's letters began appearing in 1969, investigators couldn't help but notice the similarities. The handwriting, tone, and use of taunts mirrored the Zodiac's style. Some experts believe that the Riverside murder was the Zodiac's first known attack, committed 2 years before the Lake Herman Road murders. This theory is supported by a letter sent by the Zodiac to the Los Angeles Times in 1971, where he claimed, "I do have to give them credit for stumbling across my Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there." Despite these links, the Riverside Police Department maintains that the Bates murder was not the work of the Zodiac. Their primary suspect, who was never named publicly, was a man with a known obsession with Bates. Handwriting analysis also suggested differences between the Zodiac's letters and the Riverside confession letters. Still, the possibility that Sherry Jo Bates was the Zodiac's first victim remains a topic of fierce debate, and her case is often included in the discussion of Zodiac's true body count.
I mean, without knowing any more of the Riverside Police's details on notes on it, I mean,
I would say it's his first one.
I would say. Now, I will say the brutal stabbing is, well, no,
He did it too.
He did it once, but his usual thing was just to kind of walk up and shoot and
Yeah,
kill
but you got to remember, it's your first one. You're learning.
Yeah,
Your first one's always your worst.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And he started out with a symbol resembling a Z. He did the letters, and then he figured out. So at that time, he was like, "Okay, I am the Zodiac, but I'm just going to put the Z." And then figured out, "Oh, I can use the symbol from the Zodiac watch."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very possible. I mean, I'm a little miffed of why Riverside Police wouldn't think so.
Because they're stupid.
Yeah, or they're incredibly stubborn.
Another potential early Zodiac case is the double murder of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards, which occurred on June 4th, 1963, near Santa Barbara, California. The young couple was spending the day at a secluded beach when they were attacked. Both victims were bound and shot repeatedly before being placed in a small shack, which was set on fire. The attack bore striking similarities to the Zodiac's later attack on Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa. Both crimes involved binding the victims, methodical planning, and the use of a gun. Some investigators believe that the Santa Barbara murders could have been an early precursor to the Zodiac's established pattern, possibly committed during a time when he was still refining his methods. However, no direct evidence links the Zodiacs to these murders. The weapon used in the Santa Barbara case was never recovered, and there were no known communications from the Zodiac taking credit for the crime. While intriguing, this case remains another unsolved murder with only circumstantial connections to the Zodiac.
Again, this also could very well be one of his early ones. He's because he
trying to figure out his MO.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't. That was really one thing about the Zodiac. Like at first, he binds and kills the couple. Then he just walks up and kills them. Then he just includes one of them stabbing them. Another, he just guns some poor guy down in a cab. His MO is really not as ritualistic as we think, if we would think of it. But now we're starting to really see a pattern. Again, I'm not. This would probably be his really earliest one because there's no letter to the police, but everything else kind of really, matches.
On April 10th, 1962, Ray Davis, a 27-year-old cab driver, was murdered in Oceanside, California. Davis was shot twice in the back of the head while driving his cab, and his body was later found in a nearby alley. A few days after the murder, the Oceanside Police Department received an anonymous call from someone claiming to be the killer, taunting the police and threatening to kill a bus driver next. This eerily foreshadowed the Zodiac's 1969 letter in which he threatened to target school children and shoot out a bus's tires. Some have suggested that the Davis murder may have been the Zodiac's first known crime and that he was experimenting with taunting law enforcement before the more famous letters begin. The Oceanside Police Department reviewed the case in 2018, but like the Santa Barbara murders, there's no physical evidence linking Davis's murder to the Zodiac. Still, the similarities in the killer's behavior and circumstances of the crime keep the Ray Davis case on the list of potential Zodiac murders.
Seems like the Zodiac is always he commits these random crimes and then he just seems to be like, why isn't anyone catching me? You ever notice that? Yeah.
Kathleen John's story is unique because, unlike the other victims, she survived her encounter with the Zodiac. On March 22nd, 1970, Johns was driving with her infant daughter near Modesto, California, when a car began flashing its lights and honking at her. The driver, a man, told her that one of her wheels was loose and offered to help tighten it. After supposedly fixing the issue, he drove off, only to have her wheel come loose again a short distance later. When the man returned, he offered Johns and her daughter a ride to a service station, but instead of taking her there, he drove her around aimlessly for nearly 2 hours, making cryptic remarks and veiled threats. Johns eventually escaped when the man stopped at an intersection. She ran through a field with a baby in her arms, hiding in the ditch until she was rescued. Johns later identified her abductor as the man depicted in the Zodiac composite sketch. While the Zodiac never explicitly took credit for the abduction in his letters, some believe that his correspondence referring to collecting slaves for the afterlife was a veiled reference to the incident. The incident with Johns shows that the Zodiac may have engaged in crimes other than murder, adding another layer to the complexity of his profile.
That could have been it.
That could have been a really bad
Yeah.
Yep.
I believe in the movie The Zodiac, they actually showed that, right?
So, after the Zodiac's confirmed murders ended in 1969, he continued to send letters for several years, claiming to have killed more people during that time. One of the murders often considered as a potential Zodiac crime is the killing of Kathy Bielek in 1971. Bielek was brutally stabbed in a park in Saratoga, California. Her murder had similarities to the attack on Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa, but no definitive evidence has ever connected the cases. Zodiac also claimed responsibility for the abduction and murder of Donna Lass, a nurse who disappeared in 1970. Postcards sent to the San Francisco Chronicle seemed to allude to her disappearance, but the connection was never confirmed and her body has never been found. Similarly, the murders of teenage girls in Santa Rosa in the early 1970s have been linked to the Zodiac, though there is no concrete evidence to support this theory.
You ever get the feeling the police were just purposely not investigating these things because they just didn't want to give him the credit for it?
Yes, very much so. One of the most compelling theories is that the Zodiac may have continued killing under a different alias. This theory suggests that the Zodiac, after drawing too much attention to himself, decided to change his modus operandi, or MO, to move to a different area entirely. If true, this would mean that many unsolved murders across the United States could be linked to the Zodiac. Some researchers have even posited that the Zodiac might be responsible for crimes like the Texarkana Moonlight murders in the 1940s, or the infamous Black Dahlia case in Los Angeles, which Black Dahlia we are doing. It's one of my other favorites, which I can see that because they're very similar. While these theories are often dismissed as sensationalism, they highlight the breadth of speculation surrounding the Zodiac's identity and potential crimes.
I could definitely see being sensationalized. I mean, again, this is going back to when they're just trying to just stick anything and everything to him. I mean, Black Dahlia was again, I'm not saying this, but Elizabeth Short was literally cut in half. It was fairly brutal, and she actually may have been linked to another possible serial killer operating in Los Angeles at the time that had nothing to do with the Zodiac. Again, and the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. That's one we have to do because they actually made a movie about it called "The Town That Was Afraid of Sunset." No, it's actually a really interesting thing because it was just a series of seemingly random murders, but they would always occur in this one town, and everybody would just bunker down in their homes at night. Even the Texas Rangers had to come in and try and catch the guy.
So it's possible that the Zodiac inflated his body count to instill more fear and keep the public and police off balance. He may have claimed murders he had nothing to do with or exaggerating his own capabilities. Zodiac was a master manipulator who thrived on attention. By claiming 37 victims, he made himself appear more dangerous and prolific than he might have actually been. Yet the possibility remains that he was telling the truth. If the Zodiac was responsible for even a fraction of the murders he claimed, then he could be one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. Are we sure the Zodiac's not a teenage boy?
Exactly.
Like making his body count seem higher?
Yeah.
There you go. I was waiting for it to click.
No, sorry.
I smelled the smoke going.
I mean, I would like to think that he was just trying to instill fear.
I don't think he was. I think he actually committed that many murders or more.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very possible. I mean, the police just didn't seem to be able to crack his code. Crack his code. They couldn't figure out really an MO really to follow.
Which is weird.
I think his MO really was just killing.
Being random.
Yeah, that was his MO. Just going around doing whatever pleased him, Some day he's just shooting a random person. One day he's binding them and killing them and stabbing them.
What's going to end up happening is 30 years from now, they're going to finally find evidence. It's going to be a fucking woman the whole time. And everybody got it wrong. And that's why they couldn't catch. It was somebody connected to it.
Yeah.
And they got it completely wrong.
I'm not.
Could you imagine if it was the woman that gave the description of the Zodiac?
Honest to God.
That's a possibility.
It is.
It was a woman and they went, and that's why the MOs are so different because there are certain people she stabbed because they were easier. Women typically don't kill with a knife. They typically kill with a gun.
Or poison.
Yes, because it's easier. It doesn't take a lot of strength.
That and poison, it's sometimes hard to detect depending on the poison you use.
If you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind I do.
I know.
I can smell it. Ben does not. So.
Just remember, the insurance money is not completely in your name. Just saying.
Wow.
So if you're trying to bump me off of the money,
we can change that. The question of how many people the Zodiac really killed may never be answered. For the families of potential victims, the possibility that their loved ones were killed by the Zodiac is both horrifying and strangely hopeful. It means that there is still a chance, however small, that justice could be served. The legacy of the Zodiac is not just about the victims we know, but the ones we might never know. As we move into the last of our final episode, we'll look at the possibilities for solving this case once and for all. Is there a chance that modern technology will finally reveal the Zodiac's true body count and bring long overdue closure to those who have been searching for answers? I'm just going to say, if the Zodiac is still alive, Ben says you can never get to him.
Hey.
Huh?
I am too young to be a widow, asshole.
What did I say? I don't say anything. Don't be putting word. Stop using me as bait for serial killers.
We can finally catch him.
I am too young to be a widow.
We can finally catch him to go sit outside on the porch. We'll egg him on.
Oh,
and we'll finally catch him.
Is it bad enough you message the cults now and call out the Scientologists? Now you have to call out the serial killers.
Or just wait till next season.
Oh, fuck.
So, the Zodiac case has eluded resolution for over half a century, a story filled with twists, dead ends, and unanswered questions. But in recent years, new technological advancements and investigative techniques have rekindled the hope that the identity of the Zodiac Killer might finally be within reach. While many remain skeptical, others believe that we are closer than ever to solving the mystery that has haunted Northern California and the world since 1968. In this segment, we'll examine the final push for answers. We'll discuss the efforts being made by law enforcement, amateur sleuths, and forensic experts to use DNA, genetic genealogy, and cutting edge technology to crack the case once and for all. Could modern science achieve what traditional investigation has not? Or is the Zodiac destined to remain forever in the shadows, taunting us with the knowledge that he will never be caught? DNA has been heralded as the greatest hope for solving old cases, and in the early 2000s, the Zodiac case seems poised to benefit from this new forensic tool. The San Francisco Police Department's forensic lab successfully extracted a partial DNA profile from the back of the stamps and envelopes used in some of the Zodiac's letters. This breakthrough was seen as a game changer, an opportunity to finally test the DNA against known suspects and potentially identify the killer. But the results were disappointing. The DNA sample was not a complete profile and could only be used to rule out suspects, not confirm them. The testing eliminated several prominent suspects, including Arthur Lee Allen, but it did not produce a definitive match to any known individual. The biggest challenge with the Zodiac DNA is its degradation. The evidence is over 50 years old, and the genetic material has deteriorated over time. Modern forensic labs are continually improving their techniques for extracting DNA from old and compromised samples, but the Zodiac case presents a formidable obstacle. Contamination from police handling, postal workers, and even the recipients of the letters complicates the ability to isolate a pure sample. Even so, new efforts are underway. In 2018, the success of the Golden State Killer case reignited hope that genetic genealogy could be used to identify the Zodiac. Genetic genealogy uses public DNA databases like GED Match and Family Tree DNA to find distant relatives of an unknown individual. By building a family tree from these relatives, it's possible to narrow down suspects and identify the person behind the DNA sample. If a viable DNA profile from the Zodiac's letters can be uploaded to these databases, investigators might be able to find distant relatives of the killer, leading to his identity. But this process is complex, time-consuming, and requires cooperation of people who may not even know they are related to one of America's most notorious serial killers. The use of genetic genealogy to solve the Golden State Killer case was a landmark moment in criminal investigations, proving that even decades-old cases could be solved with the right technology. Since then, dozens of cold cases have been closed using the same method, and law enforcement agencies have turned their attention to the Zodiac case in the hope that he, too, can be identified through his DNA. The challenge lies in obtaining a clean enough sample, because the DNA extracted from the Zodiac letters is only partial. It's not currently eligible for upload to public databases. For now, forensic experts are working to refine the sample, applying new techniques that might allow them to extract additional markers from the degraded material. If successful, the Zodiac's DNA could finally be used to search for relatives in genetic databases. But even if a profile is developed, privacy concerns pose another hurdle. The use of genetic genealogy in criminal investigations has sparked debate about the balance between solving crimes and protecting individuals' genetic privacy. Some states have imposed restrictions on how law enforcement can use genetic genealogy, and those legal challenges could impact the Zodiac investigation. Despite these obstacles, many experts believe that if the Zodiac's DNA can be used in genetic genealogy search, it's only a matter of time before a match is found. The question is whether we have the technology and resources to make it happen, and whether the killer's family tree will be cooperative in helping to solve the case.
I would like to think that if they were, as long as they were kept anonymous, they could probably. I would think to be cooperative.
The thing is the companies have to release the data, and a lot of companies won't do that. Advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning have opened new avenues for analyzing old evidence. In the Zodiac case, AI has been used to revisit the infamous ciphers, which have perplexed codebreakers for decades. While some ciphers have been solved, others remain a mystery. AI programs can analyze the structure of the cipher, searching for the patterns that the human brain might overlook. In 2020, a team of cryptographers, including Sam Blake, Jarl Van Eyck and David Orenchak used a combination of linguistic analysis and AI to crack the Zodiac's 340 character cipher that had stumped experts for over 50 years. The solution revealed a chilling message from the Zodiac, reiterating his lack of fear and his desire for control. The success of the 340 cipher spurred new interest in using AI to crack the remaining ciphers. If even one more of the unsolved ciphers can be decoded, it could provide new clues about the Zodiac's identity, motivations, or even lead to his real name. AI is also being used to enhance old photos, compare handwriting samples, and analyze witness statements in ways that were previously impossible. Another application of AI is the use of facial recognition technology. Witness descriptions and police sketches of the Zodiac have been digitized, and software can now compare these images against existing databases of known individuals, creating a list of potential matches. While this technology is still in its infancy, it represents another tool in the arsenal of those who refuse to give up on the Zodiac case. Now, the internet has given rise to a brand new breed of investigator, the amateur sleuth. Websites like ZodiacKiller.com, Reddit forums, and countless YouTube channels have become hubs of activity for those obsessed with solving the case. While some contributions are speculative at best, others have yielded valuable insights that have been shared with law enforcement. One example is the use of crowdsourcing to identify potential suspects. Online communities have meticulously reviewed old police reports, pored over the Zodiac letters, and examined obscure details in search of new leads. The 340 cipher was cracked in part due to collaborative efforts of cryptographers from different parts of the world who communicated online. Crowdsourcing has also been used to track down family members of potential suspects, find forgotten pieces of evidence, and generate new theories. While some in law enforcement view this activity as a distraction, others welcome the additional eyes and ears on the case. The more people searching, the more likely it is that someone will uncover a clue or make a connection that has been overlooked. The sheer volume of data available online, newspaper archives, public records, and digitized police reports make it possible for anyone with a computer and an internet connection to delve into the Zodiac case. But the rise of online sleuths has also led to the spread of misinformation and wild speculation, often muddling the waters and causing confusion. Now, as technology advances, legal and ethical challenges are becoming prominent. The use of genetic genealogy, facial recognition, and even AI analysis must navigate a complex web of legal restrictions and privacy concerns. In the United States, laws vary by state, and what is permissible in one jurisdiction may be forbidden in another. One of the biggest concerns is the use of public DNA databases. While sites like GED Match and Family Tree DNA have cooperated with law enforcement in the past, they have since imposed stricter guidelines on how genetic data can be used. This could limit the ability of investigators to use genetic genealogy to identify the Zodiac, even if a viable DNA sample is found. Another concern is the statute of limitations. While murder has no statute of limitations, the time frame for prosecuting lesser crimes, such as abduction or assault, may have already expired. If the Zodiac were identified today, it's possible that the legal challenges could prevent a full prosecution, especially if the killer is deceased or too infirm to stand trial. The window of opportunity is closing. Many of the original investigators have passed away, and the families of the victims are aging. Each year that goes by without resolution brings us closer to the possibility that the Zodiac case will never be solved in a court of law, even if his identity is discovered. So, what if, after all this time, the Zodiac is never caught? What if the answer is lost forever, hidden beneath layers of time and misdirection? For many, the Zodiac is more than just a criminal. He's become a symbol of the unknown, the embodiment of a mystery that defies resolution. If the Zodiac is never identified, he will remain a ghost, a specter that haunts the annals of criminal history, forever taunting us with the knowledge that he got away. For the families of the victims, the uncertainty is agonizing. Every lead that ends in a dead end, every theory that falls apart under scrutiny is a reminder that justice may never be served. Yet the search continues. Investigators, both professional and amateur, refuse to give up. The Zodiac case has inspired books, documentaries, movies, and podcasts, but at its core, it's about real people. Victims who were robbed of their futures and families who were denied closure. As technology continues to evolve, there's always the possibility that the Zodiac secrets will finally be laid bare. New DNA extraction methods, enhanced AI capabilities, and fresh eyes on old evidence all keep the hope alive. But whether these advancements will bring answers we seek remain to be seen. The Zodiac case is a reminder of both the strengths and limitations of human ingenuity. It's a testament to our drive to understand, to seek justice, and to never stop searching for the truth, no matter how elusive it may be. As we draw this episode to a close, one question lingers. Is the Zodiac out there, watching, laughing at our attempts to catch him? Or has his identity already been forgotten, buried in an unmarked grave, his true name lost to history? In the end, the Zodiac Killer may be the greatest mystery of all, a puzzle without a solution, a riddle that cannot be solved, and that perhaps is what makes him so enduring, so unforgettable, and so terrifying. As we reach the end of our journey through the Zodiac Killer's terrifying reign and relentless search for his identity, we're left with one final question. What is the true legacy of the Zodiac? Beyond the murders, the letters, and the taunts, what lasting impact has the shadowy figure left on the world? The Zodiac's crimes were not just acts of violence, they were psychological warfare. His true weapon wasn't just a gun or a knife, but fear, confusion, and manipulation. He preyed not only on his victims, but on the minds of the public and the police. He created a persona that was larger than life, a boogeyman who still haunts our cultural imagination. And yet, the real tragedy of the Zodiac case lies in the people it left behind. The families who have endured decades of pain, uncertainty, and a lack of closure. In this final part of our series, we'll look at the enduring legacy of the Zodiac Killer. We'll explore how his crimes have shaped criminal investigation, influenced our culture, and altered the lives of those who were left behind. We'll also discuss whether true closure is ever possible for the families of the victims and what, if anything, would bring an end to the story of the Zodiac once and for all. The Zodiac case forced law enforcement agencies to confront their own shortcomings. The failure to catch the killer, despite numerous witnesses, physical evidence, and taunting letters, highlighted the need for more sophisticated investigative techniques and better interagency communication. One of the key changes that emerged from the Zodiac investigation was the development of task forces and centralized databases for tracking serial offenders. In the early 1970s, law enforcement agencies across different jurisdictions were often siloed, with little information sharing. This lack of coordination was a significant obstacle in the Zodiac investigation, as the murders took place in multiple counties with separate police departments each handling each case. Today, national databases like the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VICAP, help connect seemingly unrelated cases, making it easier to identify patterns and catch serial offenders. The Zodiac case also contributed to the evolution of psychological profiling. While early attempts to profile the Zodiac focused primarily on physical traits, the case highlighted the need to understand the psychological and behavioral aspects of an offender. This approach has since become a cornerstone of modern criminal investigations, used in cases ranging from Ted Bundy to the BTK killer. Beyond the realm of law enforcement, the Zodiac has left an indelible mark on American culture. His crimes have been the subject of countless books, movies, and television shows, each offering its own interpretation of the man behind the mask. Films like Zodiac and Dirty Harry have immortalized his story, while TV series like Mindhunter have used this case to explore the psychology of serial killers. But why does the Zodiac continue to fascinate us? Why, after all these years, do we still find ourselves drawn to his story? Part of the allure lies in the mystery itself. The Zodiac is not just a killer, he's an unsolved puzzle. His use of ciphers and cryptic symbols created a narrative of intellectual superiority, a game that the public and law enforcement were invited to play. The fact that we still haven't fully decoded his messages adds to his mystique, making him a figure who seems almost beyond comprehension. The Zodiac also represents a deeper fear, the fear of the unknown. He was able to kill with impunity, evade capture, and then vanish without a trace. His ability to manipulate the media and the police made him seem omnipotent, a phantom who could be anywhere and nowhere at once. This fear of an unstoppable, unknowable force has permeated our culture, influencing everything from horror films to crime genres. While the Zodiac story has been told and retold, the families of its victims have often been relegated to the background. For them, the case isn't about ciphers or letters. It's about lost loved ones and the pain of not knowing. Each new theory, each new suspect is a reminder that justice has not been served. For decades, these families have struggled with their grief and their intrusive nature of the public's obsession with the Zodiac. Many have been approached by amateur sleuths, journalists, and even strangers claiming to know the identity of the killer. Some have chosen to engage with these efforts, hoping that any lead, no matter how small, could bring answers. Others have sought to distance themselves, only wanting peace and privacy. For the Jensen and Faraday families, the deaths of Betty Lou and David were devastating losses. Their children, so full of life and potential, were taken in a random, senseless act of violence. The Farron family suffered through a barrage of rumors and innuendo as Darlene's name became entangled in countless conspiracy theories. Brian Hartnell has survived the attack at Lake Berry as has carried the weight of that day for his entire life. His survival forever linked to the death of Cecilia Shepard.
Survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul Stein's family, who had hoped for a quick resolution, found themselves in the midst of public spectacle, with the Zodiac's taunts prolonging their suffering. Paul's sister, Carol, in particular, has been vocal about the pain of losing her brother and the frustration of seeing the case turn into a media circus. For those families, closure is not just about identifying the Zodiac. It's about reclaiming the memory of their loved ones. It's about shifting the focus away from the killer and back to the victims who deserve to be remembered as more than just entries in a police report. Will there ever be closure? The question of closure is complex. If the Zodiac's identity is revealed, will that bring an end to the story? For some, the answer is yes. Knowing the name and face of the man who inflicted so much pain would provide a sense of justice, even if it comes decades too late. For others, the damage is irreparable. The wounds are too deep, the pain too enduring. The name alone cannot bring back what was lost. There's also the possibility that the Zodiac may never be conclusively identified. If the DNA evidence is too degraded, if no more ciphers are cracked, if no new witnesses come forward, we may be left with the same uncertainty that has defined the case for over 50 years. Killer's identity may remain a tantalizing mystery, just out of reach, forever obscured by time and misdirection. But that doesn't mean the story is over. The search for the Zodiac has inspired a generation of detectives, journalists, and everyday people to never give up on finding the truth. It has shown us that even the darkest mysteries can be brought to light with persistence, ingenuity, and the refusal to let the case go cold. So, as we conclude our series on the Zodiac Killer, we're left with a paradox. The Zodiac may never be caught. His true identity may never be known, and yet his story continues to captivate and inspire. He is both a figure of fear and a symbol of hope. Hope that one day, even the most confounding mysteries can be solved. The Zodiac's letters ended with a cryptic message. Me equals 37. SFPD equals 0. It was his way of asserting dominance, of mocking the investigators who pursued him. But while he may have evaded capture, he did not win. The search for the Zodiac has not ended. It continues with each new piece of evidence, each breakthrough in technology, and each person who decides that the case is worth solving. So as we close this chapter, we leave you with one final thought. The Zodiac is not just a story of darkness and terror. It's a story of resilience, of the unyielding pursuit of justice, and of the enduring belief that even the coldest cases can be brought to light. Because the true legacy of the Zodiac is not his crimes, but the unwavering resolve of those who refuse to let his victims be forgotten. And with that, we want to thank you guys for listening to us this season, season 2 of this podcast. It has grown. The podcast has reached parts of the world that I never thought it would reach. I cannot wait to see where it continues going into season 3 and season 4 and however long we get to do this. Once again, we want to thank you guys for continuously being here with us and listening to us babble on and on. And we hope that you will come back in January, in the beginning of the year, for season 3, where we're going to be redoing old cases, giving you better quality, and even adding new stuff that may have shown up since we did it last. So a lot of the next season get will get a redo. Will be a redo of season 1. All those old episodes will be removed and deleted since we'll have a better quality. So season 1 will be a shorter season, where season 3 will catch up on a lot of stuff. And then once we're done with those repeats, we will move on to brand new ones, because we've got hundreds of topics that we want to reach out. History, true crime, sci-fi. There's so much that we plan on doing. So once again,
And if you guys have any suggestions for topics, reach out to us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, or you can email us at scarlet.tavern.podcast@gmail.com.
and with that, we want to thank you for visiting the Scarlet Tavern. Please remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seat, and as always, tip the bard. We will see you next year. Bye, everybody.
Good
night.
night.